someone sitting on $5 million in cash.
All right, y'all, let's talk Beast Games. If you're new around here, my name is Kevin, and I was a contestant on MrBeast's game show, Beast Games. So the episodes have begun to drop, but before we head over to Amazon Prime, you can go to MrBeast's channel and watch what led up to those moments. In MrBeast's video, 2,000 people fight for $5 million, which I'll link in the description below if you hadn't had a chance to watch it yet. This video will be a review of that episode, a little bit of behind the scenes conversation, we'll be talking strategy and a few other things. There was so much chaos, drama, and epic moments packed into a 24-minute episode. But what if I told you that that was just the tip of the iceberg? What you didn't see was 5 days of intense competition, sleepless nights, wild strategy sessions, and yes, a few sore losers who left big mad. In this video, we'll be breaking down what is affectionately known as episode 0. And we'll do this like you've never seen before. I'm gonna give you the inside scoop of what really went down, the strategies behind some of those challenges, some of the audibles that MrBeast and his team called on the fly, and even some behind the scenes moments that didn't make the cut. And so if you're ready for a no holds bar review of the challenges of episode 1, let's dive in.
What you are witnessing is just the start of something never before seen in history. 2,000 people are about to battle in a series of trials for a spot in my 10-episode Prime Video series called Beast Games.
Now, as I mentioned in my previous video, this was a shocker to many of us, especially me. You see, we were all aware of a show that was going to be on Amazon Prime that was going to take 1,000 people and dwindled it down to 1, where that one person would win the greatest grand prize in game show history. $5 million. But what we didn't know is that episode 0 was going to be the audition for that opportunity. Although it wasn't labeled an audition, effectively that's exactly what it was. So let me try to sum it up quickly for you. There were a lot of unknowns leading up to the games. The audition and the screening process, I mean, can you imagine 2,000 plus people? I mean, I can't even imagine how many applications that they got, but 2,000 plus people trying to organize all of the details, getting flights and hotels, making sure everybody was taken care of. So needless to say, it was a little chaotic. We arrived at the hotel a few days before and we weren't really allowed to talk to anybody. And on the day that shooting was scheduled to begin, the call time was quite early. We were given our uniforms and then given garbage bags to place over those uniforms. Then we were to head down to the lobby where we would meet and then be bussed over to another hotel and be held there until we were ready to go into the stadium. You know, all that stuff that leaked back in July. So we leave our hotel, get bussed to a second hotel, and there we have to kind of sit in a ballroom for a few hours as everything is getting ready. Now, mind you, at this point, those who were bussed from my hotel to the hotel that we're now at, we had already turned in our phones and all of our electronic devices. Understandably so. So while our group was waiting in this ballroom to be bussed over to the stadium, the people that were staying in that particular hotel hadn't turned their stuff in yet. And Jimmy, MrBeast, had sent out a video kind of welcoming everybody, letting him know how excited he was to be having 2,000 people compete for a chance to win $5 million. Did you pick up on that? 2,000 people for $5 million. And for us who didn't have our phones any longer, we didn't see this video. And so we eventually arrive at the stadium. We're debriefed before we move on to another waiting area. And in that debrief is when I find out that it's not 1,000 people in the stadium, but yet 2,000 people. So we're given dinner, we're waiting in a particular area, and we're waiting there to do some photo opportunities, kind of, some of the behind the scenes things. And eventually the plan was to head into the stadium and begin the competition. So all of the people were divided into 4 groups. We had group A, B, C, and D. This will be important later. Each group was funneled to their specific area where eventually those tunnels would be open up and we would enter the stadium. A, B, C, and D. So when the doors open, this was the most epic moment thus far. I mean, it's like a more advanced Hunger Games set. I mean, you walk into the stadium, it felt so overwhelming. I mean, it was huge. Everything was big. There are drones flying everywhere, cameras everywhere. You see Jimmy and the team on one side. You've got this master kind of area where all the announcements were being made. And then you get to see the $5 million in front of you. So again, there's 2,000 of us. That means that in those 4 groups, there are 500 people per group. Then And Jimmy eventually reveals what the first game is going to be. After welcoming us, he gives us an opportunity to see this is going to be the game. So at this point, we're given some time to strategize. So we start talking, we start thinking this is what it's going to be. It's going to be a pulling type thing, a rope is going to be revealed. But all of this we don't really see quite yet. But everybody began to notice that there was a fifth lane, 4 groups of 500. And then Jimmy says this.
I need all of you to split up into 5 groups of 400. Whichever group is the last to lift that 10,000-pound boulder across that finish line is eliminated.
When he said this, panic ensued. And so the guards open up these chests and they give us these pennies. You go up to pick up your penny, effectively letting you know what team you were going to be on. Well, everybody had already kind of assumed what lane they were going to be in when they were in groups of 500. But since there's only groups of 400, there was only one of 2 ways that this was going to go down. Either a stronger group was going to be formed off to the side where people were essentially picking the best of the best as they wanted it, or people were going to stick with the groups that they came in with, and as a result, there was probably going to be a bottom 100 of each of those groups. And the bottom 100 of each of those groups would actually make up that 5th team. And that's exactly what happened. Not that they were bad or worse in any way, it's just the people that weren't as assertive to grab their pennies were going to be left without pennies and forced to go to that other team. But you snooze, you lose, right? You see, what you don't realize is what is beautifully captured in 2 to 5 seconds actually took hours to pull off. I mean, it's amazing how they can take hours of footage and just dwindle it down to seconds. So we had all that time to talk strategy, and so our team came up, developed the strategy where we were going to pull together. We had developed a chant and we were going to pull together. And as we were developing this, we didn't really know what kind of tension would be on the rope. So all of that strategy went out the window when Jimmy said, 3, 2, 1, go! When he did, and we felt the pressure of that rope, we knew that the only way to actually do this was to hold on to that rope and run backwards as fast as you could. And that's exactly what we did, and that's why you see Orange Team being first. Now let's talk some drama for a moment. Obviously, we were unaware of what was going to happen hours after Red Team had gotten eliminated. But what you begin to realize is that as all of those leaks began to happen, it was shortly after Red Team had been released from the stadium. So again, you ask me, were the conditions really that bad? Or were you just upset that you were the first ones to leave? I'm just saying, I get it. No one wants to be the first one out. In fact, that was one of my greatest fears. I left my home just praying that I wouldn't be the first one out in any particular challenge. But that's when all the unfair talk happened and the food was bad and this was going on and I hurt my leg and I fell down and got a boo-boo. Boo-hoo, man, we were competing for $5 million. And let me remind you, we weren't promised anything and still got a stack of money on our way out. If you ask me, we should have just been grateful. Is it unfortunate? Yeah, but we had to dwindle 2,000 people down to 1,000 people in less than 5 days. And heck, I'm just gonna go and say it. The people that came out and are anonymously suing, let's just talk about the fact that there were 2,000 of us and 5 people are suing. Come on, let's be real. So let me quote to you the reason why they decided to do so. Listen to the ridiculousness. Widespread mistreatment, inadequate compensation, serious emotional distress, including suffering and anguish and fright and horror and nervousness and anxiety, worry, shock, humiliation, and or shame. You were competing for $5 million. You showed up for less than a week and walked away with $2,000. Get over it. And so then all the clickbaiters jump on this ridiculous, preposterous stuff. I mean, I'm not gonna reference any of those people because it's not worth actually wasting your time to read all of the lies. But then you begin to read the comments of the people that were commenting based on their kids being there. And the greater problem that we had is how many helicopter moms we had of people that were over 18. Here's where some of my opinion comes in. Now, I want to open this to say this is just my opinion. This was not said. This was not done. But we had finished this particular competition, the tugging of the rope for the 10,000 pound boulder, and it had finished later than I think we had anticipated. Now, as you see in the video, and I'm gonna point them out right here, in the video you see all of these stands and these platforms. There's a particular amount of them set up throughout the entire course of the stadium. Now, here is my opinion, and I could be wrong, but I think that the platforms that we ended up standing on at the end were supposed to be used earlier on, either between challenge 1 and challenge 2, or between challenge 2 and challenge 3. Now, again, this is just speculation. It's just what I had thought, but because things had ended so late and other things came up throughout the night, I feel like they just called an audible knowing that, hey, it's best just to have everybody fresh, ready, good to go for the next one. So we're given our sleeping bags, we tuck in for the night 1. Now we're waiting about 18 hours. Obviously we're fed a few times, we're having conversations, having a good time, but we wait about 18 hours until we begin to set up for the next shoot. And in that 18 hours, you could have slept, you could have worked out, you could have ran around, you could have done whatever you wanted to do. My 18 hours could be off a little bit. Again, you have no concept of time when you're in a stadium with no phone and no watches and kind of nothing else going on. I believe if I remember correctly, there was a clock so you knew what time it was, but everything seems kind of irrelevant at that point when you're just so focused on what's going on. Then we set up and do the transition between event 1 and event 2, and the briefcases are brought out. What they don't show in the video is how long it took for that process to ensue. They were so meticulous and so thoughtful about how everything had to be done, but they're the professionals. And what I've learned about TV, what I've learned about television shows or YouTube videos is that for it to be done right, you just gotta wait. It's a waiting game more than it is a competition game. And some of the reason why some of those people quit before things even happened was just because they didn't want to wait anymore. But on to challenge 2, my second favorite, if you ask me. I really enjoyed this challenge. I thought it was very beautifully crafted, but these are the rules to that challenge. Take a look.
In front of you is a sea of briefcases. Some say eliminated, some say saved. On the Jumbotron, we are going to quickly show which briefcases are safe and which are eliminated. Your goal is to memorize where the safe briefcases are and claim one before someone else does.
Now I'm just gonna show you the orange team because that's the one that I was on. I was on Team Orange, and it was kind of a surprise when we found out that we would be going up against each other, but at the same time, we knew that eventually something like that was going to happen. I mean, if you're a mrbeast fan, you know that twists and turns are to be expected. So what's crazy is, even though we knew that we were competing against each other, we cared enough about each other, the people around us, that we almost began to map out, hey, you go here, this is the plan here. But the briefcase key didn't flash for too long. You didn't have too much time to strategize. You just had to kind of be quick about it. But once you made your call, and if you were loud enough about it, you probably were gonna get that one as long as you could get there quickly. Because the truth is, as much as you strategized on one side, depending on where you were going, there's a whole other crew coming from 2, 3 other sides that could potentially get the one that you wanted. Now, if you were confident in your running ability and your ability to kind of compete with whoever would be on the other side, you would go more towards those center ones, because as they are running one way, you're running the other. And if you could just beat them in a foot race and get to a green one, you're good to go. So that was my challenge, and you see kind of where I mapped out, and this is where I landed. Take a look.
Put 'em up. What'd you get?
So by the time I touched that briefcase, I knew I was safe. And in fact, what happened was there was a couple other briefcases that were green around us, and there were people looking around still floating. And so we made sure that there were some of those floaters got to some of those green ones, and we let them know, you're good, go ahead, you can get that one. And I remember one girl in particular, I ensured that she just got that one because we knew it was green. This one took the longest because of the setup. They wanted to make sure that each and every red and green was placed and replaced, and the resetting up between teams is what took the longest. And so that's why between green and yellow, they said, hey, you got to make sure to pay attention. And so even though there's a little bit of drama where it makes it seem like they didn't see it that long, they saw it with enough time. They had plenty of time to look at the key, because they felt bad for the team. They didn't want anybody to feel like they had been cheated just because they were last. So the key flashed, and if you had been paying attention, as you had been warned to do, you would be just fine. There was no disadvantage for being on that last team. We just had to keep moving and get going. Finally, challenge number 3. Now this one was my favorite, and at first I had a completely different idea for how I was gonna go into this challenge. Now again, mind you, a whole other day has gone in between challenge 2 and challenge 3. But once it is revealed and we are ready to go, my plan was to stay in the back while everything was being explained. My plan was to stay on those platforms until I knew, hey, I could probably beat this group of people and then eventually go. But the people that I was kind of working with, they had a different plan. In fact, Chris, this guy right here, my boy Chris, had a completely different plan, and just to be honest, it was a better plan. What we did is we implemented the same strategy on the briefcases with the flags. So what we did is we worked together and we called out our flags. You actually see Jimmy along the way say,
Most people that cross the red line end up getting a flag.
Yep, that's me.
And not many people have actually been eliminated.
why? Because we were calling them out. And this is where some of the people like, oh, it was unfair, the guys were aggressive. We were making sure that if you were like a good, solid person, you were getting a flag. We were doing as much as we could for the people around us. And those that were ultra aggressive, ultimately, like we knew we couldn't beat, he just didn't go that round. Ultimately, I got my flag. Number 186, baby. Now these were the other people in my crew, and each and every one of them got a flag as well. We've got Chris, Mandy, Celia, and Brooklyn. All of us made it to the next round. So now, it's already late, this challenge ends. Think about it. It was 1,100 people that were going for flags. I mean, mind you, there were way more than that. It dwindled to that particular number. But then we are taken to our eating area. We go and eat, we get dinner. And along the way, so for all the people complaining about the calories, listen, the food was not great, but we were competing for $5 million. I will eat cold oatmeal for the rest of my life if it meant I had a shot at what I was competing for. But what people forget is that along the way, we were eating Feastables like it was currency. Like we were trading it on the block. Like that was gold. Not only did they taste good, but like there's enough calories in there to carry you on to the next thing. So we had enough to survive based on the meals they were giving us, but then you had the additional calories from the delicious chocolate. Hashtag Feastables, not sponsored. So now we're waiting. We had eaten our dinner. We're waiting around as they are setting up the final challenge. And this one was the most stressful because we had been waiting around for a long time. We knew something like this was coming. We didn't know the extent of what the bribes would be, but everybody kind of knew something like that was around the corner. So again, what isn't captured is how long everything took, not just in between, but the actual challenge itself. So we'd been sitting there for a while. It looks like just a few 10-minute countdowns, but there was a lot of in between that occurred. You know, there was some drama on each of the platforms, like, you know, wanting to make sure that your people aren't going to hop off for any old reason. And you saw what happened. I mean, basically that challenge was just stick it out as long as you could. So our strategy, if we can even call it that, is we had people on the outside that, if anything, we were going to try our best to convince people not to hop off. But the reality is you couldn't touch anybody and we weren't going to hold anybody back. But we did our best to make sure that the people on the outside were the people you were confident with and you knew they were not going to be the ones to hop off of the platform. Now, if somebody came running from the back and slipped through us and jumped off, there was nothing we were going to be able to do about that. But the hope is that based on the conversations you had in the previous 3 to 4 days, that those were going to carry you through that particular challenge. And when that girl hopped off, again, you saw how angry their platform got, but it does not capture the roar that just went on in that stadium. I mean, it felt like the Super Bowl in that moment, where it was so loud, so much cheering, all of the exhaustion, all of the time up until this point culminates in like an uproar, like a yelling, an exuberant excitement, cheering all over the place, with just people realizing like we have made it to the show. Like this was the goal. Now that we knew it was 2,000 going down to 1,000, we are on the show. We are making it to Beast Games. And that is what happened in Vegas. What did you think about the challenges? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to smash that like button. And if you want to continue to follow along as we do episode breakdowns, as we do challenge breakdowns, make sure to hit that subscribe button with the notification bell turned on so that you don't miss a thing. My goal is also to get some of my friends to be interviewed, some of the ones that made it to later rounds. As they get eliminated, we'll bring them on almost like a post-elimination interview. We can get some of their insights, get some of your questions answered along the way with episodes. If you have any questions, also put them in the comments. I read every single comment, so I want to make sure that if you have questions, I'm going to address them in future videos. But again, stay tuned, stay hyped, and stay subscribed, because this is just the beginning. It's going to be an epic ride. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next one.